sermon this afternoon, we're going to take a brief look at one of the kings of Judah. And by looking at this king, we'll be reminded of several principles that are going to underscore the fall holy days, and most specifically the Feast of Trumpets. Now, we know from biblical history that we had a divided kingdom of Israel and Judah following Solomon, the house of Israel in the north, the house of Judah in the south. They had their individual separate kingdoms and kings. So we're going to come down to the time of King Amaziah of Judah. We're going to take a look at him. And he ruled from about 800 to 772 BC. Now, the prophets Elijah and Elisha, just to give you a sense of where we are in history, have already finished their work, and they're gone from the scene. And the house of Israel only has about 50 more years before they're taken into captivity by Assyria, I should say. So let's go to a book that we turn to almost every Sabbath for services and for sermons, 2 Chronicles. Book of 2 Chronicles, chapter 25. So here it tells us about this King Amaziah. Let's see what it says about him. Amaziah was 25 years old, so a pretty young man. When he began to reign, he reigned 29 years in Jerusalem, quite a long time. His mother's name gives her name in verse 2, and he did that which was right in the sight of the Lord. Well, good for him. Not all the kings did. He did what was right in God's sight. Now, he wasn't perfect, had his faults and so on, but fundamentally it says he did that which was right in God's sight. So that's good. Certainly commendable for a young man in taking a leadership role in this way, and all the challenges that he faced. Now, down in verse 5, it says, "Moreover, Amaziah gathered Judah together and made them captains over thousands and over hundreds, according to the houses of their fathers, throughout all of Judah that he was ruling over, and Benjamin, and he numbered them 20 years old and above, and had about 300,000 soldiers that he could use in a military effort, able to go forth to war that could handle the spear." So he's going to begin a military campaign against Edom. Edom had been in subjection to Judah, but they kind of revolted and broke away, and he said, well, no, you're not doing that. We're bringing you back. We're going to take you back in control and subjugate you once again. So he's going out in this campaign against Edom. And he numbers his army, but as many as that is, he feels like, well, this is not quite enough. I'm not comfortable with the number of men that I have. So down in verse 6, he hired also 100,000 mighty men of valor out of Israel, and he pays them 100 talents of silver. So let's add another 100,000. We'll get these mercenaries from the house of Israel in the north. I'll give them 100,000, or I'll give them 1,000 talents, 100 talents, of silver, and pay them. And now we'll have 400,000. We'll go against Edom, and that sounds like a good idea to him. Well, verse 7, there came a man of God to him saying, "Listen, king, do not let the army of Israel go with you, for the Lord's not with Israel. Don't use them. I am not pleased with what's going on in Israel. I'm not going to bless their effort. They're going to be a hindrance to you if you use them. You will be better off without them. Don't include them. I'm very displeased with what's going on in the house of Israel, and they're about to go into captivity. Exclude them. Don't use them." Well, down in verse 8, if you do go and be strong for the battle, God will make you fall before the enemy. In other words, it's not going to work out well. You think you're better off with 400,000. I'm telling you, with my backing, you're better off with 300,000. Don't do it, is the advice from God. Excuse me. The first lesson that came to my mind in thinking about this, when God takes note of Israel and what they were doing up there, is that God does take note when we do right or wrong. In other words, because of what Israel was doing, he said, don't take them. I'm not going to bless their effort. In Jeremiah 32, if you want to keep your finger there, I'll read these scriptures to you. Jeremiah 32 says, great in counsel and mighty in work, for your eyes are open upon all the ways of the Son of Man, to give every one according to his ways, according to the fruit of his doing. Fundamentally, everyone's going to be rewarded according to their ways. God takes note of it and sees it. And you could tell that he was not pleased with Israel, didn't want them to be a part of what the king and Judah were about to do. Israel as a nation, thought God was no longer a factor. He doesn't care. He doesn't see. It doesn't matter to him. We got people doing evil and it doesn't look like anything happens to them. We got bad things happening to good people. It looks like it doesn't matter at all. God's no longer a factor. Doesn't really matter. I'll read Zephaniah chapter 1 and verse 12 to you. Zephaniah 1:12. I will search Jerusalem with candles and punish the men that are settled on their lees, that say in their heart, the Lord will not do good, neither will he do do evil. He's indifferent. It doesn't matter. I wonder if that's a sentiment that we hear and more people are adopting. It doesn't matter. Well, there is no God. It doesn't matter to God one way or the other. He's not watching. He doesn't care. We used to think, well, in God we trust, in God we believe, and well, that's really no longer a part of our psyche. We don't trust in God. It doesn't matter whether you do or you don't. Seems to be the drift that we can even identify with ourselves in our own society. Well, back to 2 Chronicles 25, and pick up the story there. Verse 9. So he's told, don't take these people. Keep your 300, you'll be better off. So what is his response? And Amaziah said to the man of God, hey, what about the 100 talents of silver I spent? How am I getting that back? I'm out that money. The man of God answered, the Lord's able to give you much more than this. Don't worry about your 100 talents of silver. You're thinking, I've already paid them. So don't worry about that. God's able to provide a blessing to all of us. We gave an offering here earlier because we believe God's able to provide a blessing. Remember what it said in Genesis 14, verse 9? Blessed be Abram, the Most High God, possessor of heaven and earth. We have faith that God can see and reward us. It says that in Matthew 6. In verse 6, but you, when you pray, enter your closet, and when you shut your door, pray to your Father which is in secret. Your Father which sees in secret shall reward you openly. God will see. God will note. God can reward you. We believe God will bless those that do right in his own way, in his own time, as he chooses. If we're generous, we have faith, God returns it to us. So the man of God said, don't worry about your money. God will take care of that. He's out 100 talents of silver. It's quite a bit of money. Naturally, that was his response. But we believe, as it says in Hebrew, without faith it's impossible to please God. So we live a life of faith, whether it's giving an offering or whatever we're doing. We believe God sees us and rewards us in his time. We leave that to him. It's a life of faith and trust in him. Otherwise, you can't please God if you just live by sight. Back to the story. Verse 10, 2 Chronicles 25. Well, then Amaziah separated the army, told the people that came down from Israel, separated them. The army that was come out of Ephraim told them to go home. I don't need you. And it says, wherefore their anger was greatly kindled against Judah, and they returned home again. Now you'd think they said, well, great, we got the money, don't even have to risk our lives, don't have to go to war. But they kind of wanted some of the glory. They wanted to get in on punishing Edom perhaps and be a part of that. And you brought us all the way down here. Now you're sending us home. We're offended, even though we got paid, got our money. So on the way home, they decide they'll kind of plunder a few of the towns of Judah on the way back home, out of spite and out of anger and disappointment. So that's what they decide to do. Well, if you read the story, Amaziah wins a great victory. He's blessed. He defeats Edom, listened to God's counsel, trusted in God, and what's the result? They win a great victory. Didn't need the 100,000 people from Israel, just like God said. What a great example of faith and obedience. And we probably think he'll remember that the rest of his life, how this worked out. What a great, lasting lesson. Well, and we come down to verse 14. So he wins this victory, and it comes to pass after that Amaziah was come from the slaughter of the Edomites, that he brought the gods of the children of Seir, set them up to be his gods, and bowed down himself before them and burned incense unto them. What are you thinking? You just won this victory. God just blessed you with it. You followed what he said. You followed what the prophet told you to do. And you win, and on the way home, well, let's take their gods and set them up. What are you thinking? What are you doing? What's going on in his head, we might say? Well, verse 15, no surprise, the anger of the Lord was kindled against Amaziah, and he sent unto him another prophet, which said unto him, Why have you sought the gods of the people which couldn't deliver you? Those gods couldn't ensure a victory for their people. Why would you take their gods and thou take them as your God and turn your back on me who gave you the victory? Does that make any sense? What are you thinking? What's going on in your head? Well, Amaziah, what'd he say? You're right. I've been foolish. Well, verse 16, it came to pass as he talked with him, that is, the prophet talked to the king, that the king said unto him, well, who asked for your advice in any of this? Who set you up as my advisor, my counselor? Back off, is basically what he's saying. The king says, are you made the king's counsel? He said, you better watch it. You better watch it. Why should you be smitten? So you better get out of here. Nobody asked for your 2 cents. So the prophet said, okay. Prophet forbore and said, I know that God is determined to destroy you because what you've done, and you won't listen. Okay, I won't say any more. I'm out of here. I tried. You could have repented. You could have seen what you were doing. Then Amaziah, the king of Judah, took bad advice, bad counselors, maybe some of his own age instead of those that were older and wiser. Amaziah, the king of Judah, took advice, sent to Joash, the son of Jehoahaz, the son of Jehu, who happened to be the king of Israel, the house of Israel, the king up there, and said, come, let's look at each other face to face. In other words, let's go to battle. He got this wonderful advice. The advice was, why don't you get even for these mercenaries that plundered some of the towns of Judah on the way home? Why don't you get even? That was the advice. Now notice verse 19. This is the king of Israel now, talking to Amaziah. He said, "You say, 'Lo, you have smitten Edom, and your heart lifts you up to boast. Abide now at home. Why should you meddle to your own hurt that you should fall, even you and Judah with you?'" He says, you defeated the Edomites. Now you think you're really great. Your heart is lifted up. Your victory's gone to your head. You better go back home before something very bad befalls you. A couple more verses in this story. Amaziah, in verse 20, he wouldn't listen. "For it came of God that he might deliver them into the hand of the enemies, because they sought after the gods of Edom." So Joash, the king of Israel, went up. They saw one another face to face, Amaziah, the king of Judah, and so on. And Judah was put to the worst before Israel, and they fled every man to his tent. That was God helping Israel that he wasn't pleased with because of his response. The point that I'm bringing out in this very unusual story is what a change in this person. What a change came over him. Here he decided, I'll follow God, I'll listen to the prophet, I guess step out on faith, I'll go with the smaller army I have without the 100,000 from Israel, I'll do what you say. Great victory, you'd think I've learned a lesson, what a wonderful God. Follow God, everyone, follow his prophets. And it's like a complete reversal. I said before, what is he thinking? Well, the lesson for us that ties into this particular day, on the Feast of Trumpets and Christ's return, is that humans without God's Spirit are incapable. They are incapable of sustaining righteousness or walking fully in righteousness. Human beings cannot govern themselves or others for at least an extended period of time. Yeah, there are examples of quality individuals and success to a limited degree. But that's not the story of human beings and mankind and his history and his rule. Given the right circumstances, the spirit of the world eventually wins. Something comes over people. Something impacts their thinking. The lust of the flesh, lust of the eyes, pride of life gets the better of every human being sooner or later. Look at John chapter 2. We're done in Chronicles with that story. John chapter 2, verse 24. John 2:24. It says, "But Jesus did not commit himself unto them," to the people, "because he knew all men." He knows what goes on in the minds of men and women. He knows how we think. He knows what happens. He knew all men, and needed not that anyone should testify of man. He knew what was in man. I know what's going on. I know history. I see the track record. I know human beings. Yes, there are good people. Yes, there are sincere people. People that do right things and that try to do right things. But fundamentally, the human condition is what it is. Jesus knew that. He knew the religious leaders were going to see him as a threat. Absolutely guaranteed. They were going to see him as a threat as people adhered to him and gravitated towards him and his message and contrasted that with the Pharisees and the other leaders. Knew exactly what would happen. Ephesians 2 and verse 2. Ephesians 2 and verse 2. It tells us of the general condition of the world, wherein in times past we all walked according to the course of the world. What's the world doing? How are they thinking? What's the latest philosophy? What's the latest trend? What's the next generation that thinks they have the answers to everything? We walked according to the prince of the power of air. It's a spirit that now works in the children of disobedience. It's a spirit that works. Man has free moral agency, but a spirit of the world explains the tendencies, our failings, what we are. Amaziah, as a king, when he was humble, when he was willing, when he needed God for a victory, God's prophet said, here's the way to do it. All right, do it your way. Once he had the victory, it was his brilliance. It was his army that did it. It was his leadership. That's how I won. And it went to his head. He became prideful. He didn't need God in the same way. Gets into Edom. Here's all these wonderful idols, and they're probably expensive. Well, let's make them our gods. Bring them back and set them up. How could you think that way? How could anybody think that way after that? Well, humans do. Very few that gain power can resist the pulls of human nature. It's very difficult once you're exalted or placed in a position of power and all these people look to you and you have that authority. What happens to people in leadership roles? Not everybody, every time, but generally speaking. They begin to think, well, I can be unethical because it'll be for the good of the organization. I can compromise here. I can be unethical because it's better for the party in the end. I can do this. It's generally wrong for everybody else, but I'm the leader. I'm in a special position. They're thinking that way. It's natural. We have to protect our power by any means, or something worse will result. I'm the only one that can save us. I'm the only one. Many messiahs down through history. Let's go to Deuteronomy chapter 8. Read here in Deuteronomy 8, verse 10 through 14. I'm not just singling out some ruling class as though they have a fault that ordinary people don't have. It's all the same dynamics, just the circumstances are different. What did God say in Deuteronomy chapter 8 to the people of Israel? He said in Deuteronomy chapter 8 and verse 10, when you have eaten and are full, then shall you bless the Lord your God for the good land which he has given you. But you better beware, because now you're full. Now you're at peace. Now there's safety. Now you're prospering. That's the time to beware. Well, why? Why would that be? What's going to happen? Well, you're a human. There's tendencies. Beware that you forget not the Lord your God, and not keeping his commandments and his judgments and statutes, which I command you this day, lest when you've eaten and you're full, you've got really nice looking houses and neighborhoods, and you're prospering, and the other countries see your prosperity, and you dwell therein, when your herds and your flocks are multiplied, your silver, your gold is multiplied, and all that you have, everything's going great, then your heart will be lifted up. Well, naturally. You didn't even have to try. You'll forget the Lord your God, which brought you forth out of the land of Egypt from the house of bondage. So human nature, you call it human nature, is a strange phenomenon. It's a strange phenomenon. What could be stranger than Amaziah? Great victory, followed what God said, and brings their gods back and sets them up. What are you thinking? How did that happen? There's probably a number of factors that went into that, and some of the advice he was getting as well. So like Ecclesiastes says, there's really nothing new under the sun. It's kind of the same cycle, same dynamics, same activity, same function. People go through these cycles down through history, individuals that have been oppressed or outraged. Finally, they've had enough oppression by some ruler or somebody dominating them. They rise up and they've had enough and they rebel against it, and understandably so. Life is miserable. They rise up against the oppression. Then when they're in power, they oppress the people now that they're in charge of. Ends up being the same thing, but now they have the authority. The Protestants rebelled against the Catholic Church and its excesses and its persecution and its inquisition, and they broke away. And this is not right, and we're separating, and you're not following our demands. Martin Luther and so on, other Protestant leaders. Once they broke away, some of them burned individuals at the stake if they didn't accept the Trinity. Burned them at the stake. Protestant leader. Burned some, he wouldn't accept the, forget the gentleman's name, it's well known in history. Burned at the stake. Refused to accept the Trinity. So we'll burn you at the stake. After we broke away from the Catholics for what they were doing. Human nature is a strange phenomenon when you think about it. Strange stories of history in that way. Well, as I mentioned, Jesus knew what the religious leaders would do in his day. This tells us why mankind cannot rule himself or find the way to peace. Yes, for a while it can happen. There can be the prosperity, and it's up and down, and there's cycles, but fundamentally it's the same rise and fall over and over again. And everyone has a new solution, the new answer to bringing in a utopia of one type or another. Mankind cannot rule himself or find the way to peace. That's why Christ has to come back and save mankind from himself. At some point, the cycle has to stop. At some point, God will say, we're not going to keep repeating this indefinitely. The rising of nations, the prosperity, the happiness, the self-satisfaction, the pride, the decline, and someone else comes along. And they're on fire about prosperity and growing, and they rise up, and on it goes. Where's Babylon today? Where's Assyria today? Where's the Persian Empire? Where's the Rome? Where are they? Gone. Same cycle, same thing. So God is simply saying, we've seen that here today, well, we're not going to keep doing this forever. Jeremiah 10, verse 23. Jeremiah 10, 23. Jeremiah 10:23, Lord, I know the way of man is not in himself. It's not in man that walks to direct his own step. The wherewithal is just not there. We just cannot come up with it on our own. We can in a limited way for a time, but we can't rule our own selves, and we can't rule other people either. The way is just not there. It's not the solution. Mankind needs a lamp to guide his path. Something's got to guide me. This is the way you ought to do it. Follow that guide. That'll keep you where you need to be. You need a Holy Spirit to ensure right thinking, to help keep you there, keep you on that path, keep you walking in that way, because your tendencies are going to be always the pull to get outside. Use your own thinking. Jesus is the only one that has fully conquered the spirit of the world. Let's read a couple of those. John 16, John 16:33. Jesus is the only one down through history that he conquered that, this tendency, this way that man has followed. John 16, verse 33, these things I've spoken unto you, that in me you might have peace. In the world you're going to have problems. Be of good cheer. I've overcome this world, that spirit of the world, the way of the world, the thinking of the world. The things that if I had my own strength without the strength of the Father, I'd be going along like everybody else. Without the strength of the Father, the Bible said Jesus had the Spirit without measure. Without God's help in me, of course, Jesus said, I can't of myself do nothing. Without God's help, I would have succumbed to Satan saying, I'll give you the entire kingdoms of the world. You are top. Everybody follows you, worships you. If you fall down and worship me, men would take that. That's why he fasted 40 days, so he wouldn't be drawn toward what human beings are drawn toward. And of course, the other temptation Satan has as well. John 14:30, Jesus said, hereafter, I'll not talk much with you. The prince of this world comes. He's got nothing in me. He never gets the best of me. He's not going to pull me away. Not going to take a different path. He has nothing in me. He's the only one in history that conquered that walked that way perfectly. Came into the world, walked that way, and gave his life. Nobody else could do that. Even with good intentions. What do we read about Amaziah? And Amaziah did that which was right in the sight of the Lord until he won the victory. Well, now, look at the winner here, the king. So we're observing these holy days, and we're not observing the Feast of Trumpets or Feast of Tabernacles just to picture something. Let's just picture a time of peace. Let's picture good weather and prosperity. And let's picture kids playing in the street and there's no danger. And there's no carjackings and there's no theft. Let's picture this. Let's go to the feast and picture all of this. And that's okay. That's a part of it. But let's read Deuteronomy 14. Deuteronomy 14:23. Deuteronomy 14:23. It says here in Deuteronomy 14:23 about the holy days, the feast. You shall eat before the Lord your God in the place which he shall choose to place his name there. You're going to have the tithe of your corn and wine and oil and firstlings and so on, that you might picture what a wonderful world is going to be. Well, not really. And maybe fine if we do that. You have to have a sense of, well, what are we talking about here? Try to construct that. But it's that you may learn to fear the Lord your God always. We're going the holy days so we might learn something, be reminded of something. What are we supposed to think? Well, you're supposed to picture prosperity and everybody happy and plenty to eat and no more wars. Well, that's not primarily it. Now, the fear of the Lord, I think we know. We don't need to go into a lot of that. Fear of the Lord is not some kind of cowering that God's going to do something. You better fear God, or he's going to punish you or crush you, and he's vengeful and unforgiving and unmerciful. That's not what the fear of the Lord is. I won't go to a lot of scriptures. I won't go to any of them. You can look up fear of the Lord on your own. in study aids and helps. But here's what you will find. The fear of the Lord, and you'll have a verse that says this, the fear of the Lord is clean. It's clean. Fear and cowering and afraid, that's not clean. That's ugly. That's dark. But the fear of the Lord is clean because it keeps you going in the path you need to go. The advice to Amaziah from the prophet was clean. Here's how you're going to win. Follow this, you'll win. The advice from his friends, dark. The fear of the Lord is clean. The fear of the Lord is enduring forever. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Now you're finally waking up. Finally know what you're doing. The fear of the Lord is to hate evil. That's sure true. The fear of the Lord is to hate pride and arrogance. Who likes that? Who enjoys that? Except people in the world when they get some kind of authority. I love it. The fear of the Lord is strong confidence. You're confident. The fear of the Lord is a fountain of life to depart from the snares of death. That's the fear of the Lord. So you might go up and whatsoever and take your tithe and whatever you desire, that you might learn to picture the world tomorrow. That you might learn to fear the Lord. So you have all of these things for yourself. All these benefits. So the fear of the Lord protects us from us. Protects us from ourselves. Without the fear of the Lord, we'd follow what we think. What's going on in our head? Like Amaziah. Who asked you to be my counselor? What are you doing in here? I didn't call for you. Get out of here. That's how you'd think. Instead of, oh, you again. You have any other advice for me? What you said to me last time was great. You got anything else? Get out of here. Who asked you to come in here? I won. I'm the king. We just follow that way. Couple more verses. Daniel chapter 2. Just a reminder of this one, since we're talking about this day. I don't recall turning here. If we did, somebody will say you weren't paying attention, but Daniel chapter 2, verse 44. So here's what God is basically saying. In the days of these kings shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed. Finally, God said, we just cannot allow this same cycle over and over forever, perpetually. And it's not just, well, a nation rises and a nation falls. Think of the suffering, the death, the inhumanity, the unfairness, the injustice that comes along with all of that. He said, we're not having this go on and on forever, which it would. It would never stop. It'd just be a new chapter, a new flavor, a new backdrop. Everybody thinking this is the answer, and then it's not the answer to life. And then there's decay. Somebody else wants to rise up, and they sacrifice, and, well, you know the story. It was even true with God's own nation. Ezekiel 36, then, here's the answer. Ezekiel 36, verse 25. Ezekiel 36, 25, 26. So at Christ's return, there's a spirit of this world, which we read about, and that's active, and it enters people's minds, and we think a certain way. We're subject to things. We can't conquer it totally. So in verse 25 of Ezekiel 36, then I'm going to sprinkle clean water on you, and you'll be clean. Okay, we're going to forget about this mess of the past. From all your filthiness, all your idols, I'll cleanse you. I know why it happened. I know how it took place. A new heart also will I give you. A new spirit will I put within you. You're going to think differently. I'm going to take away the stony heart out of your flesh, which blocked God's advice, God's way, so that you could then follow your own desires and thinking. But get rid of that stony heart and give you a heart of flesh. That's the answer. Well, Jesus is going to be that king, as we know. He's not going to become haughty. Look at all the nations following me. No one's ever had all the nations of the world. And now it's going to his head. And people around Jesus see, oh, he's changing. He won't listen to anybody anymore. That's not going to happen. He's already proven. He's already submitted himself to God, and he's overcome all of that. That doesn't attract him. None of that's interesting to him. He won't become haughty or change from the good, nor will those who have authority under him. We know better. We see how that happens. We know how that works. To him that overcomes the world, its thinking, its path, I'll give to be over the nations. So it's not going to happen to those under Christ either. So the lesson for us, because we're not there, as we heard in the sermonette, we're not incorruptible yet. We're not changed, as it said in 1 Corinthians 15. We have to hold fast to walking within that framework of the kingdom of God. We can't allow things to happen that happened to Amaziah. What was he thinking? I keep saying that. I kept saying that when I read it. What are you doing? Well, he's just a human being. That's it. So we have to hold fast to walking within the framework of the kingdom of God. Even religious people are starting to forsake some of their convictions, and in all that we see breaking down in our society. I've heard it from Christian leaders in our society today. Kind of a sentiment, one said, pursuing virtuous ends by virtuous means was a fool's errand. Doesn't work. Being a nice guy, being righteous, being ethical, doesn't work. Tough times call for tough measures, which is a way of saying, well, we got to get down and dirty like everybody else. Religious people are starting to think that way in our society. Or it's always a justification. Well, that isn't right. Well, you can't do that. That's a lie, or that's this, that, or the other. Well, look what Clinton did. And the other one, well, look what Trump did. In other words, we're going to look at somebody else's failings, and those failings then become a righteous cause for us to do the same thing, and when we do it, it's okay. You know, well, look what they did. We can't think that way. This is what we see more and more around us. That can't be in the church of God. We don't walk that way. Don't think like that. Not like Amaziah. It's why we have the days of unleavened bread and all the holy days and the day that we've had here today. So we begin the fall holy days today at a wonderful day, wonderful Feast of Trumpets. Let's rehearse not only the plan of God. Let's not just, we'll just picture what's coming. Let's go through the plan of God. Well, we're going to have this, and Christ's going to return, and we have the Day of Atonement, and let's just walk through all of that. That's fine. That's a part of it. Let's rehearse not only the plan of God, but most importantly, the way and the thinking of God.